Imagine walking into the headquarters of one of the biggest companies in the city. You're dressed professionally, confident, and heading toward the executive boardroom, when suddenly, right in front of everyone, a white female manager steps in your way and coldly says, "I'm sorry, you're not allowed in here." What no one in that lobby knew was that the black man standing silently before them had no intention of arguing or getting angry, because he already knew that within a few minutes, every single person who had just underestimated him would be standing to welcome him. This is a story about prejudice, power, and an unbelievable twist that left an entire board of directors speechless. And the ending will keep you watching until the very last second. The easiest mistake a leader can make is believing they already know who belongs behind the next door. Morning sunlight spilled across the glass walls of Hawthorne Logistics headquarters in downtown Chicago, turning the marble lobby into a mirror of gold and silver as executives hurried toward the largest board meeting of the year. Every elevator chimed with quiet precision. Every assistant carried folders marked confidential. Every conversation seemed to stop for only one reason. A major announcement was expected before noon, and no one knew exactly who would deliver it. Rebecca Collins walked through the lobby with the confidence of someone who had earned every step of her career. At 35 years old, she had become one of the youngest operations managers in the company's history, known for demanding excellence and protecting executive protocol without compromise. Her cream business suit was perfectly tailored, her brown blonde hair neatly gathered, and every detail reflected discipline. She believed appearances communicated professionalism before a single word was spoken. As she approached the executive corridor, the security doors opened once again. A man entered carrying nothing more than a slim leather portfolio. He appeared to be about 40 years old, dressed in a premium black business suit with a crisp white shirt and dark tie. His posture was relaxed, his expression calm, and his sharp eyes quietly observed the lobby before he walked toward the executive entrance. Rebecca stepped into his path with practiced confidence. "Good morning," she said politely. "This corridor is reserved for today's executive meeting." The man returned an equally courteous smile. "Thank you. That is where I am heading." Rebecca glanced at the guest list displayed on her tablet. His name was not there. "There must be a misunderstanding," she replied. "Visitor registration is handled downstairs, and the executive floor is restricted until the meeting begins." Around them, several executives slowed their pace without pretending they were not listening. The man never raised his voice or challenged her authority. Instead, he nodded respectfully. "I understand why you are asking." His calm response caught her slightly off guard. Most people became defensive when redirected. He simply waited. Rebecca gestured toward the reception area. "If you would like, someone can assist you with registration while we verify your appointment." He thanked her sincerely, but remained standing where he was, one hand resting lightly on the leather portfolio. His confidence seemed unusual, yet there was nothing confrontational about it. The silence between them grew longer as more executives entered the lobby, quietly wondering why the meeting had not yet begun. An assistant hurried from the elevators and whispered something to another director before disappearing again. Moments later, the chairman himself emerged from the executive hallway, scanning the lobby with unexpected urgency. The instant his eyes found the waiting visitor, his expression brightened. Without hesitation, he crossed the polished marble floor and extended both hands warmly. "Mr. Nathan Carter," he said with genuine respect, "I apologize for keeping you waiting. Everyone upstairs is ready, and we cannot begin without you." The lobby fell completely silent. Rebecca slowly lowered the tablet in her hands as the realization settled over every face watching the exchange. Whatever meeting had brought the company's leadership together that morning, the quiet man she had politely turned away was not an unexpected visitor. He was the person every executive had been waiting to welcome. The chairman kept his hand warmly extended as Nathan Carter returned the greeting with quiet confidence, and the silence that settled across the marble lobby seemed to suspend time itself. Executives who had been checking messages only moments earlier slowly lowered their phones. Assistants stopped in mid-step. Even the reception staff looked toward the unexpected meeting with expressions of genuine curiosity. Rebecca Collins remained standing beside the executive entrance, her tablet still resting in her hands as she tried to understand what had just happened. The chairman smiled naturally, as though greeting a trusted colleague rather than an unfamiliar visitor. We appreciate you making the trip too. Chicago, he said sincerely. Nathan answered with the same calm professionalism that had defined every word since he entered the building. Thank you for inviting me. I am looking forward to today's discussion. The chairman gestured toward the executive elevators. Everyone upstairs is waiting. We agreed that nothing would begin until you arrived. Several members of the senior leadership team exchanged puzzled glances before quietly following them toward the elevators. Rebecca remained motionless for a brief moment before joining the group. During the short ride to the executive floor, no one spoke very much. Nathan stood quietly near the rear of the elevator, holding his leather portfolio with relaxed confidence, while Rebecca replayed their earlier conversation in her mind. She had followed procedure exactly as she understood it, yet something about the encounter continued to trouble her. Nathan had never appeared frustrated, defensive, or impatient. Instead, he had responded with patience that now seemed even more remarkable. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, revealing the largest boardroom in the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, filling the room with brilliant morning light that reflected across polished walnut and marble surfaces. Every seat around the conference table had been carefully prepared, and a large presentation screen waited quietly at the front of the room. The chairman invited Nathan to enter first. Instead of directing him toward one of the guest chairs, he led him to the seat positioned beside the head of the table. Several directors immediately stood to greet Nathan with warm handshakes and genuine smiles. They welcomed him by name, thanking him for accepting the invitation and expressing appreciation for the time he had devoted to the company over recent months. Rebecca quietly took her seat farther down the table, watching each introduction with growing uncertainty. She had carefully reviewed every briefing document before today's meeting, yet none had mentioned Nathan. The chairman waited until everyone settled before addressing the room. Thank you all for being here. Today represents one of the most important milestones in our company's history. He paused briefly before looking toward Nathan. Many of you have spent the past year working with consultants, financial advisors, and strategic planning teams. Throughout that process, one individual has quietly guided nearly every major conversation without seeking recognition. The room became noticeably quieter. Nathan opened his leather portfolio and placed several organized folders neatly on the table. His movements remained deliberate and unhurried. There was no trace of pride or self-importance in the way he carried himself. The chairman continued, Mr. Carter has spent months evaluating our operations, meeting with stakeholders, reviewing long-term opportunities, and helping shape decisions that will define this organization for years to come. One board member leaned forward with genuine interest. Your recommendations have already influenced several of our largest strategic initiatives, she said. Nathan acknowledged her comment with a grateful nod. Successful organizations are built through thousands of thoughtful decisions made consistently over time, he replied. The strongest strategies only succeed when they are supported by trust. Rebecca listened carefully as every sentence seemed to reveal another layer of the man she had met only minutes earlier. She realized that while she had judged him by what she assumed she knew, everyone else in the room respected him because they had taken the time to know his character. As the chairman prepared to begin the formal presentation, he looked around the table with quiet confidence. Before we discuss the future of this company, he said, it is important that we first understand the person who helped make that future possible. Every eye turned toward Nathan, and Rebecca understood that the meeting she believed she was protecting had only truly begun the moment he walked through the door. The chairman stepped toward the large presentation screen, and the first slide appeared against the wall, displaying nothing more than a single sentence in simple lettering. Great organizations are remembered by how they treat people before they know who those people are. The words remained on the screen for several quiet seconds before anyone spoke. Nathan Carter stayed seated with his leather portfolio closed in front of him, allowing the room to absorb the message without interruption. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Chicago skyline stretched beneath a clear morning sky, while sunlight reflected softly across the polished conference table. Every executive remained unusually attentive. The chairman finally broke the silence. During the past year, we have examined every aspect of this company, he said. Financial performance, operational efficiency, market expansion, client satisfaction. Yet the greatest lesson we discovered could not be measured by any spreadsheet. He looked toward Nathan with visible respect before continuing. Leadership culture determines whether every other investment succeeds. Nathan slowly stood and walked toward the presentation screen with calm confidence. His expression remained composed, and his voice carried neither pride nor hesitation. "Thank you," he began. "Over the past 12 months, I have spoken with warehouse employees, drivers, receptionists, managers, customers, suppliers, and investors. They all described different responsibilities, but they remembered the same thing. The first interaction they experienced with this company shaped every expectation that followed." Several executives nodded thoughtfully. Nathan advanced to the next slide, revealing charts that connected employee retention, customer loyalty, and leadership engagement over several years. "Strong financial results are important," he explained. "But trust is the foundation that allows those results to continue." A senior director leaned forward with genuine curiosity. "What surprised you most during your review?" Nathan smiled slightly before answering. "That the smallest moments often have the greatest influence. A greeting at the entrance. A conversation in a hallway. The willingness to ask one more question before reaching a conclusion." Rebecca Collins listened carefully, feeling every sentence resonate more deeply than she expected. Nathan had not referred to their encounter in the lobby yet. She could not stop thinking about it. His presentation never sounded accusatory. Instead, it invited everyone in the room to examine their own habits with honesty. Nathan continued, "People often believe organizational culture is created by mission statements framed on a wall. In reality, culture is created by ordinary behavior repeated consistently every day." The room remained completely silent. Several board members exchanged thoughtful glances while making notes beside printed reports. Nathan walked slowly across the front of the room, speaking with the quiet confidence of someone interested in building understanding rather than proving a point. "Authority can open a door," he said. "Character determines what happens after people walk through it." Rebecca lowered her eyes briefly before looking back toward the screen. She realized she had spent years believing that efficiency always required quick judgment. Now she began wondering whether genuine leadership required something different altogether. Nathan paused before advancing to the final slide. Instead of financial projections, it displayed a simple photograph of employees from different departments standing together inside one of the company's distribution centers. "Every person in this organization contributes to the same mission," he said. "Different responsibilities, different experiences, shared purpose." The chairman rose from his seat once again and looked around the conference table with quiet satisfaction. "There is one final matter before we continue our strategic agenda," he announced. "Everything discussed this morning has prepared us for an important announcement regarding the future direction of this company." Every executive looked toward him with renewed attention while Nathan calmly returned to his chair. Rebecca felt her heartbeat quicken without understanding why. She sensed that the next few moments would reshape not only the organization but also the assumptions she had carried into the building that very morning, and the silence filling the boardroom seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. The chairman allowed the silence to linger before taking a slow step toward the center of the boardroom. Every executive remained focused on him while the morning sunlight continued pouring through the towering glass walls, illuminating the polished walnut table with a warm golden glow. Nathan Carter sat calmly with his hands folded over the leather portfolio that had remained closed since the meeting began. His expression had not changed since he first entered the building. There was no sign of anticipation or triumph, only quiet confidence. The chairman looked around the room before speaking. "Several months ago, our board faced the most significant decision in this company's history. The transportation industry is changing faster than ever before, and we recognized that long-term success would require more than financial strength. We needed a leader capable of protecting our values while preparing us for the future." Several directors nodded in agreement. Every person in the room understood the importance of what was about to be announced. The chairman continued, "After careful evaluation, the board unanimously approved a strategic acquisition that secures the future of Hawthorne Logistics while preserving every employee position and every existing client relationship." A new slide appeared on the large presentation screen displaying the official announcement that the acquisition had been completed. The room remained completely silent as executives carefully read the information before them. The chairman turned toward Nathan with unmistakable respect. The acquiring organization is represented by Mr. Nathan Carter, who will immediately assume the role of executive chairman and chief executive officer under the newly established leadership structure. The announcement settled over the room with extraordinary weight. Several executives exchanged astonished glances before standing to congratulate Nathan. Others quietly applauded with genuine admiration. Nathan rose from his chair and shook hands with each board member who approached him, thanking every person with the same humility he had shown throughout the morning. Rebecca Collins remained seated for several seconds, absorbing everything she had just heard. She slowly looked toward Nathan, remembering the calm professionalism with which he had responded outside the executive entrance only a short time earlier. She realized that at the exact moment she believed she was deciding whether he belonged inside the meeting, he had already been entrusted with helping shape the future of the entire organization. Yet despite that extraordinary reversal, Nathan had never corrected her publicly, never questioned her professionalism, and never attempted to embarrass her in front of anyone. That realization weighed more heavily than the announcement itself. The chairman welcomed Nathan to address the leadership team for the first time in his new role. Nathan walked to the front of the room with measured confidence before looking around the table. "Thank you for the trust you have placed in me," he began. "An acquisition changes ownership on paper. Leadership changes culture through daily actions. My goal is not simply to guide this company toward greater success. My goal is to ensure every person who enters this building is treated with professionalism, respect, and fairness regardless of where they begin their journey." His words carried quiet conviction rather than dramatic emotion. Every executive listened carefully. Nathan continued, "People rarely remember every presentation they attend or every quarterly report they read. They remember how they were treated during moments of uncertainty. Those moments define organizations far more than any balance sheet." Rebecca felt herself lowering her eyes briefly before looking back toward him with sincere reflection. She understood that Nathan had chosen to lead through example instead of revenge. The authority he now possessed gave him every opportunity to criticize or humiliate someone who had misjudged him earlier that morning, yet he deliberately chose another path. That decision transformed the atmosphere inside the room more powerfully than any announcement ever could. As the executives resumed their seats, the company entered a new chapter not through fear or celebration alone, but through the quiet realization that true leadership begins when power is used to elevate others instead of diminishing them, and everyone present sensed they had just witnessed the beginning of something that would shape the organization for years to come. The boardroom slowly emptied after the formal announcement, yet the atmosphere remained unusually quiet. Conversations that would normally have focused on market forecasts and integration plans instead drifted toward the ideas Nathan Carter had shared only moments earlier. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Chicago skyline glowed beneath the afternoon sun, while long reflections stretched across the polished conference table. Rebecca Collins stayed behind after the other executives gathered their notes. She watched as Nathan carefully organized the same leather portfolio he had carried into the building that morning. Nothing about his movements suggested triumph. Nothing about his expression reflected satisfaction at surprising anyone. He simply worked with the same calm professionalism that had defined every moment since he arrived. The chairman paused near the doorway before looking toward both of them. "I believe this conversation is one the two of you should have privately," he said with a warm smile before quietly leaving the room. The door closed gently, leaving only the distant sounds of office activity beyond the glass walls. Rebecca stood for several seconds before finally walking toward Nathan. "May I have a moment of your time?" she asked. Nathan looked up and smiled politely. "Of course." She drew a slow breath before speaking. "This morning I believed I was protecting company protocol. Looking back now, I realize I was relying on assumptions instead of understanding. I judged a situation before asking enough questions. I am sincerely sorry." Her voice carried honesty rather than obligation. Nathan listened without interrupting. When she finished, the silence between them felt thoughtful instead of uncomfortable. "Thank you for saying that," he replied. "Acknowledging a mistake requires more courage than pretending it never happened." Rebecca lowered her eyes briefly. "What troubles me most is not that I made a mistake. It is how natural that mistake felt at the time. I have spent my career encouraging others to remain objective, yet I failed to do that myself. Nathan nodded with quiet understanding. Every leader eventually discovers a blind spot. What defines them is not whether it exists. It is whether they choose to learn from it. Rebecca looked toward the city beyond the windows before speaking again. You could have corrected me immediately in the lobby. You could have told everyone exactly who you were. Nathan smiled gently. Would that have helped you become a better leader? She thought for a moment before slowly shaking her head. Probably not. Then there was no reason to do it, he answered. Leadership is not about winning moments. It is about creating opportunities for growth. Those words settled over the room with unexpected weight. Rebecca realized that the greatest demonstration of authority she had witnessed all day was not the announcement of the acquisition. It was Nathan's decision to protect another person's dignity even after being underestimated. After a quiet pause, Nathan walked toward the conference room windows. When I first began my career, he said thoughtfully, someone once reminded me that every person enters a building carrying a story that cannot be seen from the outside. I have tried to remember that lesson every day since. Rebecca joined him beside the glass, watching the traffic move steadily through the streets below. I think I forgot that somewhere along the way, she admitted. Nathan turned toward her with the same calm expression he had carried since the beginning of the day. Then today has already been valuable for both of us. Rebecca looked surprised. For both of us? Nathan nodded. Every conversation teaches something. Yours reminded me that patience is never wasted. Mine reminded you that curiosity should always come before certainty. We both leave this room stronger than we entered it. A quiet smile appeared across Rebecca's face for the first time that day. It was not the confident smile of an executive protecting her reputation. It was the sincere smile of someone grateful for the chance to become better. As they left the boardroom together and walked down the executive hallway, employees respectfully greeted their new chief executive officer, while Rebecca noticed something she had overlooked for years. Every greeting, every handshake, and every simple act of courtesy quietly shaped the culture of the organization. She understood then that the future Nathan hoped to build would never depend only on business strategy. It would depend upon ordinary people choosing respect before assumption, one conversation at a time, beginning with their very next encounter. Several weeks passed before the first visible changes began appearing throughout Hawthorne Logistics. Yet the transformation did not arrive through dramatic announcements or sweeping policy changes. Instead, it emerged quietly through hundreds of ordinary conversations that slowly reshaped the atmosphere inside the company. Every morning, Nathan Carter arrived before most of the executive team, carrying the same leather portfolio and greeting the security officers, reception staff, maintenance employees, and warehouse supervisors with the same sincere respect he offered board members and investors. His routine never seemed designed to impress anyone. It simply reflected the way he believed leadership should be practiced. Employees soon noticed that the new chief executive officer remembered names, asked thoughtful questions, and listened without appearing rushed. Rebecca Collins noticed those moments more than anyone else. She had spent years believing leadership happened almost entirely inside conference rooms, where major decisions were debated and strategies approved. Watching Nathan move naturally through every level of the organization challenged that belief. One morning, she followed him through the distribution center as he stopped to congratulate a forklift operator celebrating 20 years with the company. A few minutes later, he thanked a warehouse coordinator for identifying a scheduling problem before it affected customers. Neither conversation lasted longer than 60 seconds, yet both employees walked away standing a little taller than before. Rebecca quietly asked, "How do you know which conversations matter most?" Nathan smiled as they continued walking across the busy warehouse floor where sunlight filtered through high windows onto rows of organized inventory. "Every conversation matters," he answered. "People rarely forget how they were treated when no one else was watching." Those words stayed with Rebecca throughout the week. She began changing small habits that previously seemed unimportant. She stopped rushing through the lobby each morning and instead greeted receptionists before heading upstairs. She visited departments she had rarely entered unless a problem required executive attention. She asked younger employees about their goals instead of limiting conversations to deadlines and reports. At first, the changes felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, but gradually they became natural. One afternoon, Nathan invited the senior leadership team into a smaller conference room overlooking the Chicago River rather than the formal executive boardroom. The atmosphere felt noticeably different. There were no assigned seats, no elevated chair at the head of the table, and no elaborate presentation waiting on the screen. Nathan stood near the windows holding nothing except a notebook. "Today is not about quarterly performance," he said calmly. "Today I would like each of us to describe one lesson we learned from another employee during the past month." The request surprised everyone. One operations director spoke about patience after observing a customer service representative calmly resolve a difficult situation. A finance executive described learning creativity from an intern who suggested a simpler reporting process. Rebecca listened quietly before it became her turn. She looked around the room and spoke honestly. "I learned that leadership is demonstrated long before authority is recognized. I spent years believing respect followed titles. Now I understand that respect should come first." The room remained silent for a moment before several colleagues nodded thoughtfully. Nathan thanked her with a warm smile, but offered no further comment, allowing her reflection to stand on its own. After the meeting ended, the chairman quietly approached Nathan near the windows. "The financial transition has gone remarkably well," he observed. Nathan looked across the river where afternoon light shimmered on the water. "Strong numbers matter," he replied. "But if people trust one another, strong numbers become easier to achieve." The chairman smiled. "When the board approved this acquisition, we believed we were securing the future of the business. I did not realize we were also creating the opportunity to redefine what leadership would look like here." Nathan closed his notebook and nodded thoughtfully. Organizations change one decision at a time. Cultures change one interaction at a time. As evenings settled across the city and employees gradually left for home, Rebecca remained standing in the lobby watching colleagues exchange friendly conversations that had become increasingly common during recent weeks. She realized the company had not simply gained a new executive. It had discovered a better way of seeing one another, and that quiet transformation was becoming the most valuable achievement of all. Autumn gradually settled across Chicago, bringing crisp mornings and clear skies that filled the headquarters of Hawthorne Logistics with warm natural light. Nearly 3 months had passed since Nathan Carter accepted responsibility as Chief Executive Officer, and the changes throughout the company had become impossible to ignore. Employee engagement surveys reached their highest levels in years. Customer satisfaction continued improving. Departments that once operated independently now shared ideas with remarkable openness. Yet Nathan rarely spoke about those achievements. He believed the most meaningful victories could not always be measured by charts or quarterly reports. One Monday morning, the executive leadership team gathered for a company-wide orientation, welcoming newly hired managers from offices across the country. Instead of hosting the event inside the formal boardroom, Nathan selected the main training center overlooking the Chicago River. The room had large windows, simple round tables, and comfortable seating arranged to encourage conversation rather than hierarchy. As employees arrived, Rebecca Collins greeted each person individually at the entrance. She offered every new colleague the same warm handshake, friendly smile, and genuine welcome regardless of title or department. Nathan quietly watched from across the room without drawing attention to himself. Several months earlier, Rebecca would have focused almost entirely on schedules, credentials, and executive protocol. Now she focused first on people. She asked where each person had traveled from, thanked them for joining the company, and introduced them to teammates before the program even began. A young operations manager accidentally entered carrying a delivery bag intended for another conference room. The employee immediately apologized, clearly embarrassed by the mistake. Without hesitation, Rebecca smiled kindly, accepted the package, thanked the employee for bringing it upstairs, and calmly explained where the correct office was located. The brief exchange lasted less than a minute, yet it reflected everything Nathan had hoped the company would become. After everyone settled into their seats, Nathan stepped to the front of the room with nothing more than a notebook in his hands. "Today," he began, "I am not here to teach leadership as a theory. I am here to discuss leadership as a daily decision. Every person who walks through our doors arrives carrying experience, responsibility, hopes, and challenges that cannot be seen immediately. If we remember that simple truth, We make better decisions before the first meeting even begins. The audience listened carefully. Nathan invited several employees to describe moments during their careers when someone had made them feel respected during an ordinary workday. One manager remembered a supervisor who stayed late to answer questions during her first week. Another described a warehouse employee who patiently helped him understand unfamiliar procedures without making him feel uncomfortable. Every story shared the same lesson. Genuine leadership was demonstrated through simple actions repeated consistently over time. Rebecca remained thoughtful as she listened. When Nathan invited volunteers to share personal reflections, she slowly stood. The room became completely quiet. Several months ago, she said honestly, I believed professionalism meant making quick decisions with complete confidence. Today I understand that professionalism also requires humility, patience, and the willingness to ask one more question before reaching a conclusion. That lesson changed not only the way I lead, but also the way I see every person I meet. Warm applause gradually filled the room. Nathan smiled appreciatively, but allowed the recognition to remain entirely hers. He knew meaningful growth deserved quiet respect rather than public celebration. After the session concluded, employees gathered in small groups discussing ideas for improving collaboration across the company. The chairman approached Nathan beside the windows overlooking the river. I have attended leadership seminars for more than 30 years, he said thoughtfully. Very few continue influencing people after they end. This one already has. Nathan looked across the water where afternoon sunlight reflected gently against the moving current. Lasting change rarely begins with extraordinary moments, he replied. It begins when ordinary moments are handled differently. As employees gradually returned to their departments, Rebecca paused near the entrance and watched another group of new colleagues walk through the lobby with confidence instead of uncertainty. She realized the greatest transformation inside Hawthorne Logistics had never been the acquisition itself. It had been the quiet decision to replace assumption with understanding, authority with service, and distance with genuine respect, one conversation at a time. Winter arrived quietly in Chicago, and with it came the annual leadership summit that brought together regional managers, supervisors, and department directors from every Hawthorne Logistics location across the country. The headquarters buzzed with anticipation as employees welcomed colleagues they had not seen for months. Bright morning sunlight reflected across the glass walls of the atrium, while conversations filled the spacious lobby with a sense of energy and optimism. Nathan Carter moved naturally through the gathering, greeting familiar faces with the same warmth he offered first-time visitors. His position as Chief Executive Officer had never changed the way he treated people. If anything, it had strengthened his commitment to making every interaction meaningful. Rebecca Collins stood near the registration area helping welcome guests as they arrived. Months earlier, she would have focused entirely on schedules, credentials, and seating arrangements. Now she noticed something much more important. She noticed nervous expressions from first-time attendees. She noticed employees quietly standing alone before introducing themselves to others. She noticed opportunities to make people feel comfortable before the first meeting even began. Throughout the morning, she personally introduced new managers to experienced leaders, thanked support staff for preparing the event, and made certain every guest felt genuinely welcomed. Several longtime employees quietly observed the difference. One regional director smiled as he watched Rebecca patiently assist a newly promoted supervisor who appeared overwhelmed by the size of the gathering. She has changed, he whispered to another executive. She has become the kind of leader people remember. Later that afternoon, Nathan invited the entire leadership team into the largest conference hall for the closing session. There were no elaborate graphics waiting on the screen and no lengthy financial presentation prepared for the audience. Instead, a single sentence appeared behind him. Every great organization begins with ordinary respect. Nathan looked across the room before speaking in his calm, deliberate voice. When people ask what changed inside our company during the past year, many expect me to discuss acquisitions, technology, or strategy. Those things matter, but they are not the real answer. The real answer is much simpler. We decided that every person deserved the same level of professionalism before anyone knew their title, responsibilities, or influence. The audience listened quietly. Nathan continued, Culture is never created by one speech or one executive. It grows through thousands of ordinary decisions repeated every day. Every greeting, every introduction, every opportunity to replace assumptions with curiosity. Rebecca felt. Those words resonate deeply because they reflected the journey she had experienced herself. When Nathan invited several leaders to share examples of positive change within their departments, Rebecca slowly stood once again. The most valuable lesson I learned this year was that humility does not weaken leadership, she said honestly. It strengthens trust. Once I stopped believing I had to know everything before asking questions, my conversations became more meaningful, my team became more confident, and I became a better listener. Warm applause filled the room. Nathan acknowledged her reflection with a grateful smile before turning back toward the audience. Growth deserves recognition, he said. Not because people become perfect, but because they choose to become better. As the summit concluded, employees gathered throughout the atrium exchanging ideas and making plans for the coming year. The chairman quietly joined Nathan beside the tall windows overlooking the city. Snowflakes drifted gently through the afternoon light while traffic moved steadily below. When this journey began, the chairman said thoughtfully, I believed we were preparing for a successful transition in ownership. I now realize we were preparing for a transformation in leadership. Nathan watched the snowfall for a quiet moment before answering. The strongest organizations are not remembered only for what they achieve. They are remembered for how people feel every time they walk through the front door. The chairman nodded with quiet agreement. Around them, employees laughed together, welcomed new colleagues, and spoke with the easy confidence that grows where trust has taken root. Rebecca looked across the lobby and realized the greatest success they had built could never be fully measured on a financial report. It lived within the everyday choices of ordinary people who had learned that respect offered first often became the foundation for every achievement that followed. 1 year later, the headquarters of Hawthorne Logistics stood exactly where it always had, overlooking the busy streets of downtown Chicago. Yet everyone who entered the building sensed that something meaningful had changed. The polished marble floors still reflected the morning sunlight. The executive offices still overlooked the skyline. Meetings still began on schedule, and customers still depended upon the company every single day. From the outside, almost nothing appeared different. Inside, however, respect had become as much a part of the organization as its name displayed above the entrance. Nathan Carter continued leading the company with the same quiet consistency that had defined his very first morning. He still arrived early carrying the familiar leather portfolio. He still greeted security officers before walking toward the elevators. He still thanked receptionists, maintenance employees, warehouse supervisors, and executives with equal sincerity. Titles never determined the warmth of his greeting. Character did. Employees often remarked that the larger the company became, the more approachable its chief executive officer seemed to become. Rebecca Collins had grown into one of the most respected leaders in the organization, not because she had become flawless, but because she had become teachable. Managers frequently asked her to mentor newly promoted supervisors, and during every leadership program, she shared the same lesson without hesitation. The greatest mistake I ever made began with believing I understood someone before I knew their story. Those words never sounded rehearsed. They reflected genuine experience. On a bright spring morning, another orientation session welcomed dozens of new employees from across the country. Some arrived wearing tailored business suits. Others wore modest professional clothing after long flights and early mornings. Their backgrounds were different, their experiences varied, yet each carried the same mixture of hope and uncertainty that accompanies every new beginning. Rebecca stood beside the entrance, greeting every person individually. She shook every hand with the same respect, learned every name she could, and thanked each employee for choosing to build a future with the company. During the registration period, a delivery driver carrying several document boxes hesitated near the executive entrance after realizing he had entered the wrong hallway. Before he could apologize, Rebecca smiled warmly, walked toward him, accepted the boxes, thanked him for making the delivery, and kindly showed him the correct loading entrance without making him feel embarrassed. The interaction lasted less than a minute, yet it perfectly reflected everything the organization had worked to become. From across the lobby, Nathan quietly observed the exchange before sharing a small approving smile. He never interrupted the moment because it no longer belonged to him. The lesson had become part of the culture itself. Later that afternoon, the chairman joined Nathan beside the towering windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Together, they watched employees leaving meetings, welcoming visitors, and helping one another with ordinary tasks that once might have passed unnoticed. "Do you remember your first morning here?" the chairman asked with a thoughtful smile. Nathan nodded gently. "I remember every conversation." The chairman looked toward the lobby where Rebecca was introducing a new employee to several teammates before they walked upstairs together. That single morning changed this company far more than the acquisition ever did. Nathan remained silent for a moment before answering. Businesses grow through investment. People grow through opportunity. The strongest organizations understand they need both. Evening sunlight slowly filled the lobby with a warm golden glow as employees headed home carrying laptops, notebooks, and plans for tomorrow. New faces continued entering through the revolving doors while familiar colleagues welcomed them with patience instead of assumptions and curiosity instead of certainty. No announcement marked the moment. No applause filled the building. There was only the quiet rhythm of ordinary people choosing kindness one conversation at a time. Nathan gathered his leather portfolio, exchanged a respectful nod with Rebecca as they crossed the lobby, and stepped outside into the fading light, knowing the most valuable legacy any leader could leave behind was never a title, a building, or a successful acquisition. It was creating a place where every person was given the dignity of being understood before being judged, and where that simple choice continued long after the leader himself had quietly walked away.